I'm Michael Wilson, 29 years old, and my family demanded I give my house to my brother. Before I tell you how I sold that house behind their backs and vanished across the country, do me a favor and let me know where you're reading from in the comments. It's always good to know who you're talking to know you're not just shouting into the void. My story, the one that really matters, begins and ends with a plate of my mother's lasagna. It was a Tuesday in late May. I remember the date because I'd just landed the biggest deal of my career, a moment I should have been savoring. Instead, a familiar dread coiled in my stomach when my mother, Diana, called. Her voice was a carefully constructed melody of warmth, the kind she only used when she was about to ask for something that cost me more than just money. Michael, sweetheart, she said, your father and I were thinking we should have a family dinner tonight, a special one to celebrate you. I'm making your favorite, my favorite lasagna. That was the first red flag. My mother's lasagna was a weapon-grade dish reserved for two occasions, Christmas and emotional ambushes. Since Santa wasn't due for another 7 months, I knew exactly what kind of night I was walking into. But I went, of course I went. In a family like mine, attendance isn't optional. It's a tax you pay for tense peace. You show up, you smile, you play your part, and you hope the damage is minimal. The house I grew up in smelled of garlic, oregano, and simmering tomatoes, a scent that used to mean comfort but now only signaled an impending negotiation. My father, Robert, greeted me at the door with a heavy pat on the back that felt less like paternal affection and more like a butcher checking the quality of a cut of meat. My older brother, Jason, the reason for my existence in more ways than one, was already sprawled on the couch like a petty lord in his manor. His pregnant wife, Vanessa, sat beside him, radiating an air of entitlement that matched his perfectly. Jason offered a vague wave and that easy smile of his, the one that never faltered because life had never given him a reason to. They went through the motions, toasting my success, asking shallow questions about my work, complimenting my shirt choice. It was all so painfully perfect and normal that it made the hairs on my neck stand up. This wasn't a family dinner, this was a staging ground. Then after the plates were cleared and dessert was served, my mother made her move. She placed her hand over mine on the table, her skin soft, her grip surprisingly firm, her eyes wide and earnest, locked on mine. Michael, she began, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial murmur, we're all so proud of the man you've become, and we know deep down how much you love your brother. I just nodded, a cold lump of lasagna forming in my stomach. She took a deep, theatrical breath and dropped the payload. Jason and Vanessa, with the baby on the way, they need a stable place to start their family, a real home. So we've all talked it over, and we've decided it's for the best. They'll move into your house next month. The words didn't land like a request, they landed like a gavel, a verdict issued by a family jury in a trial I was never invited to attend. I looked at Jason. He was nodding solemnly, as if being granted an honor he'd earned. Vanessa was already lost in her plans, her gaze distant. We'll need to paint the nursery, of course, she mused, more to herself than anyone else. And that little garden you have out back, I was thinking a nice stone patio with a fire pit would be far more practical for entertaining. They were renovating my life before I'd even handed over the keys, carving up my sanctuary, the one place on earth I'd built board by board with my own sweat and sacrifice. I looked at their faces, a tableau of expectation. They were waiting for resistance, for argument, for an outburst of anger. They were ready for it, armed with their usual weapons, guilt, obligation, and the unassailable logic of family first. So I did the one thing they weren't prepared for at all. I smiled, a wide, relaxed, almost beatific smile. Perfect, I said, my voice impossibly calm. It's a great idea. I'll start packing this weekend. You could have heard a pin drop. Then the collective exhale of relief was like a physical wave. The tension drained from the room, replaced by jubilant celebration. They won, it was that easy. They hugged and laughed, already planning Jason and Vanessa's housewarming party. I excused myself and walked out into the fog. The smile stayed on my face until the moment my car door slammed shut, then it shattered. I pulled over on a dark, quiet street, the engine idling softly. I didn't scream. I didn't pound the steering wheel. I just sat there as the weight of 29 years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the family's emergency fund, finally broke me. A single hot tear of pure, unfiltered rage rolled down my cheek, then another. I gave myself 60 seconds to fall apart. Then I put myself back together, but the pieces didn't fit the same way. The man who drove that car away wasn't the same one who'd walked into that dinner. The old Michael was gone, replaced by someone cold, clear, and capable of anything. I reached into the passenger seat, pulled out my work laptop, and balanced it on the steering wheel. The screen cast a pale blue light on my face. I didn't search for real estate listings or moving companies. I opened my email and found a draft I'd been working on for weeks, a meticulously researched proposal for a new market expansion. It was a risky bet, an ambitious play. The subject line was simple: Project Initiative, Chicago Branch. My fingers flew over the keyboard, adding a final paragraph. I'm confident that with the right leadership on the ground, we can have this new branch operational and profitable within 2 quarters. I'm prepared to relocate immediately to spearhead this initiative. I read it once, then again. My escape route, my Declaration of Independence. I hit send. They thought the battle was over. In truth, the war had just begun. Sarah Peterson's email arrived at 9:15 the next morning. It was 2 lines. Michael, this is brilliant. Ambitious, but brilliant. My office, 10 a.m., a door had opened. Not just a door to a new office, but a door out of the life I was trapped in. For a moment, I just leaned against the counter in my kitchen and breathed. My kitchen, the granite countertops I'd saved 2 years to install, the subway tile backsplash I'd laid myself over a long weekend with raw knuckles and an aching back. Every inch of this house was a testament to my work, a physical manifestation of the life I'd tried to build away from my family's gravitational pull, and they thought they could just walk in and claim it. My eyes landed on a framed photo on the shelf by the window. It was of me and Sophia, my college girlfriend, taken on a hiking trip years ago. We were both smiling, sunburned, and happy. Sophia, she was the first great casualty in my long, undeclared war with my family's expectations. We'd been together for 2 years. She was smart, funny, and saw the world with a clarity I envied. She saw my family with that same clarity. They're like black holes, Michael, she told me once after a particularly exhausting Christmas dinner. They just pull everything toward them, and not even light gets out. I laughed, but she was right. The breaking point was a trip to Cancun we'd planned for our junior year spring break. It was a big deal for us. I was working 2 jobs, waiting tables at night and grading papers for a professor in the afternoons, just to cover my share. I'd saved for 6 months, every dollar a small victory. The tickets were booked, the hotel paid for. 2 days before we were set to leave, my mother called. Her voice was frantic. Jason, who was supposed to be in his 3rd semester at State, a free ride my parents were footing, of course, had a can't-miss investment opportunity. A friend of a friend was starting a t-shirt printing business. It was a sure thing. All he needed was a small, short-term loan to buy the startup equipment, $3,000. He'll pay you back as soon as the first big order comes in, my mother pleaded. Michael, this could be what finally sets him on his feet. You wouldn't want to stand in the way of your brother's future, would you? The emotional blackmail was suffocating. I was 21. I looked at Sophia, who was listening to my side of the conversation with an unreadable expression. I knew what the right answer was. I knew what she wanted me to say, but the conditioning was too deep. The fear of being the one to say no, the one to let Jason fail, was stronger than my desire for a vacation. Okay, Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll transfer the money. I hung up, and the silence in our tiny apartment was deafening. Sophia didn't yell. She didn't cry, she just looked at me with a deep sadness that was so much worse. It's never going to be about us, is it, Michael? She asked softly. As long as I'm with you, I'll always come second. I'll be competing with your brother's bad ideas, your mother's guilt trips, your father's expectations. It'll always be about them. We canceled the trip. I told her I'd work to get the money back, that we could go in the summer, but we both knew it was over. The t-shirt business collapsed in less than 2 months. Jason sold the equipment for a fraction of what he paid and used the money to buy a new sound system for his car. I never saw a dime of the $3,000, but the cost was far greater. I lost Sophia. She was right. I was a safety net, and that's a lonely thing to be. Memory still stung when my phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me back to the present. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, jaw tight. I knew what this was, the follow-up strike, the consolidation of their victory from the night before. I answered. Michael, honey, I'm so glad I caught you, she chirped, her voice dripping with relief and affection. I just wanted to call and say how much last night meant to your father and me. You have such a good heart, always have been the responsible one. Glad I could help, Mom, I replied, the words tasting like poison. There's just one small thing, she continued, and I braced myself. It's Jason's car, you know, the old sedan, the transmission making a terrible noise, and with Vanessa so far along in her pregnancy, I just can't bear the thought of them getting stranded somewhere. The mechanic quoted $3,000 for the repair, and you know how things are for them right now. There it was again, the same amount, the same tactic. It was almost poetic in its cruelty. She was testing the limits, seeing if the well was truly bottomless. She was reminding me of every time I'd given in, weaponizing my past compliance against my future freedom. The $3,000 I'd just managed to scrape together to finally fix my own decade-old, beat-up car was now being requisitioned for the cause. A year ago, I would have argued. 6 months ago, I would have sighed and given in. But today, standing in the kitchen of the house they were trying to take from me, with Sophia's sad eyes etched in my memory and an escape plan already in motion, something inside me slammed shut. A door closed, and a lock turned. You know what, Mom? I said, my voice different, colder. That's a real problem. Jason should look into getting a loan from the bank, or maybe Dad can help him out. My finances are tied up right now. The silence on the other end of the line was icy. Her cheerful mask had slipped. Tied up, she repeated, her voice sharp. in what could possibly be more important than your brother's safety and his unborn child. Just managing my own affairs, Mom, I said, like you and Dad always taught me to do. Don't use that tone with me, Michael, she hissed. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. Everything they'd done for me, or everything they'd taken from me. I thought of the scholarships I'd had to apply for because my college fund had been borrowed for one of Jason's failed ventures. I thought of the hand-me-down clothes and second-hand sports gear while Jason got everything new. I thought of the lone math trophy on my shelf. I've got to go, Mom. Busy day. Michael, don't you hang up on me. I hung up. My hand trembled not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was the first time in my life I'd said a definitive no, without apologies or explanations. It felt terrifying and it felt incredible. Later that week, I had a legitimate reason to go to my parents' house. I needed some old tax documents for the Chicago relocation package HR was preparing. My mother, still giving me the cold shoulder, curtly texted that the file box was in my father's home office and to let myself in. The office was my father's sanctuary, dark wood, leather-bound books he'd never read, and a faint smell of stale cigar smoke. It was a room designed to project power and control. The file box was tucked under his massive desk. As I crouched and pulled it out, my jacket sleeve brushed a teetering stack of mail on the desk's corner, sending a cascade of envelopes onto the shag carpet. Damn it, I muttered, picking them up. A golf club bill, an alumni magazine, a credit card offer, and then I saw it. An envelope that didn't belong. It was pristine white with a logo in aggressive red lettering, Rapid Cash Solutions, LLC. The return address was a P.O. box in an industrial park on the outskirts of town, the kind of place businesses go when they don't want to be found easily. The envelope's plastic window showed it was addressed to my father, but the first line of the letter inside, clearly visible, was a reference number followed by the name Jason Wilson. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a bank. This wasn't a credit union. This was a predatory lender, a legal loan shark. I carefully slid my thumb under the flap, which thankfully wasn't tightly sealed. The letter was a final demand for payment on a $20,000 loan, but the amount owed with penalties and accrued interest was nearly double. The due date had been 2 weeks ago. Suddenly, it all made sense. The desperation, the sudden need for my house. It wasn't about giving Jason a fresh start. It was about liquidating my one major asset to plug a hole in a sinking ship before the collectors came to break kneecaps. They weren't just asking me to be generous. They were setting me up to be sacrificed to save him. My hands shook as I slipped the letter back into the envelope and carefully replaced the stack of mail on the desk, exactly as I'd found it. I grabbed my documents and left that house, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The drive to that night's celebratory dinner felt different. I wasn't a guest of honor anymore. I was the fatted calf being led to slaughter. I knew that when I walked through that door, I wouldn't be facing my family. I'd be facing my enemies. And this time I was ready for them. I had the truth on my side, a secret weapon they had no idea I possessed. Walking through the front door of my parents' house that night was like stepping onto a stage. The lights were bright, the actors in place, and the script had been written long before I arrived. The air was thick with the scent of lasagna and false sincerity. My father's handshake was firm, a businessman closing a deal. My mother's hug was tight, a final attempt to convey affection before the transaction. Jason and Vanessa were posed on the living room couch like royalty, accepting the invisible adulation of their court. I played my part with an eerie calm that surprised even me. I smiled. I laughed at my father's bad jokes. I asked Vanessa about her pregnancy with feigned interest. On the outside, I was the same old Michael, the reliable, slightly boring son. But inside, a silent countdown had begun. Every polite nod, every forced smile was a tick of the clock, bringing me closer to the moment I'd detonate the life they'd planned for me. The dinner conversation was a masterclass in strategic maneuvering. They circled the topic like sharks, bumping against casual conventions about the rising cost of living, the difficulty of finding a good, safe neighborhood, and the importance of having family nearby when you have a baby. The apartments they're looking at are so small, my mother said with a sigh, shaking her head sadly. And the rents are criminal. I just don't know how young people are supposed to get started these days. She looked at me, her eyes full of meaning, as if I, with my single-family home, was somehow hoarding a resource that rightfully belonged to the young people at the table. It's about security, my father boomed, pointing his fork at me. A man has to provide security for his family. That's rule number one. Jason gets that. He's ready to be a father. I nearly choked on my water. Jason, the man whose loan shark debt was sitting on my father's desk, understood security. The hypocrisy was so potent it was almost dizzying. I just nodded slowly, taking a sip of water to avoid saying what I was really thinking. Finally, after the plates were cleared and a store-bought cheesecake was placed on the table, my mother decided it was time to close the deal. She leaned forward, her expression a carefully crafted blend of love and concern. Her hand found mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. Michael, she said, her voice soft and persuasive, we all know how well you've done this beautiful house your career. You've been so responsible, so smart with your money, and that's why we know you'll understand. My father cleared his throat, adding his weight to the argument. Jason and Vanessa need this, son. They need a solid foundation. With the baby on the way, it's not the time for them to worry about landlords or security deposits. They need a home. Vanessa placed a hand on her belly, her timing impeccable. We just want the best for our baby, she whispered, her eyes wide and innocent. Then my mother, the conductor of this symphony of manipulation, brought it to its crescendo. So we've all talked it over, and we all agree it's the only sensible solution. It's for the best. Jason and Vanessa will move into your house next month. The finality of it was staggering, not a request, but a decree. The family council had voted, and I, the subject of the vote, wasn't given a ballot. But it was Vanessa who delivered the killing blow. Her face lit up, the deal now sealed in her mind. She pulled out her phone, her thumb already swiping through a gallery of images. I'm so relieved we can finally get started, she exclaimed, completely ignoring the stunned silence I was supposed to exhibit. I found the most perfect color palette on Pinterest. It's called Coastal Calm. I'm thinking a soft sage green for the main living room with crisp white trim. It'll make the whole place feel so much bigger. She looked at me, as if expecting my approval. And Michael, your office is a nice room, but the lighting's perfect for a nursery. We'll move your desk and stuff to the corner of the guest bedroom. You don't really need a whole room just for paperwork and your computer, do you? This is for a baby. The condescension in her voice was the spark that lit the fuse. My office, the room where I'd spent countless nights and weekends building the career that paid the mortgage, the room that represented my independence, my hard-earned solitude, and she was dismissing it as a space for paperwork, something that could be condensed into a corner to make way for her coastal calm fantasy. She wasn't just taking my house, she was erasing me from it. I looked around the table, at Vanessa, dreaming of her new life in my home, at Jason nodding with smug agreement, the prodigal son finally returning to a kingdom he hadn't earned, at my father, his face set in a stern, non-negotiable expression, daring me to be selfish, and at my mother, her eyes pleading, begging me to make the sacrifice, to be the good son she could always count on to clean up Jason's messes. They were all waiting for the explosion, the anger, the arguments, the pleas of it's not fair. They had their counter-arguments ready, their guilt trips polished and loaded. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was playing mine. A strange sense of peace washed over me. It was the clarity that comes when you have absolutely nothing left to lose. I let my own expression soften. I let a smile touch my lips. It felt surprisingly natural. Perfect, I said. The word fell into the silence, clean and sharp. That's a great idea. It'll be good to have family close. I'll start packing this weekend. The collective sigh of relief was almost comical. Jason's smug smile widened into one of pure triumph. Vanessa literally clapped her hands with glee. My father gave a single, satisfied grunt, the sound of a problem solved. My mother's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Oh, Michael, she cried, her voice thick with emotion. I knew you, understand. I knew you had it in you to do the right thing. You've made your father and me so happy. They were celebrating. They genuinely believed they'd won. They were so blinded by their own needs, so accustomed to my compliance that they couldn't see the truth right in front of them. They couldn't see that my easy agreement wasn't surrender. It was a declaration of war. I pushed my chair back and stood. Well, if you'll excuse me, it's getting late. I've got a big day at work tomorrow. I walked to the door, the sound of their cheerful planning following me. They were already discussing what to do with my furniture, who'd get which room, when to hold the housewarming party. I didn't look back. As I drove away, their happy, celebratory faces in the lit-up window were the last image I saw of them. It wasn't a painful image anymore. It was a snapshot of my motivation, a picture of the cage I was about to escape forever. The next 3 weeks were the most stressful and liberating of my life. I was living a double life, juggling the intricate details of my escape with the constant performance of being the obedient, compliant son. Every phone call was a calculated risk, every decision a step on a tightrope. My first move was to solidify the official story. My meeting with Sarah Peterson in New York went better than I could have dreamed. The board approved my Chicago expansion plan with enthusiasm. My new life had a start date. Now I had to ensure my old life had a clean, definitive end date. The call to Emma, the discreet real estate agent, was my next step. I explained the situation with as much detail as I dared. I need this completely off the radar, Emma, I emphasized. No online listings, no yard signs. I need a buyer who can move fast and keep their mouth shut. I'm selling as is, and I'm willing to take a hit on the price for speed and privacy. Complicated family situation, you said, she replied, her voice professional but tinged with curiosity. You could say that, I responded dryly. Think of it as a preemptive divorce, but from my entire family tree, she chuckled. Got it, Mr. Wilson. I specialize in complicated. Let me make some calls. While Emma worked her magic, I built the great wall of deception around my house. The centerpiece of this was my renovation story. I called my mother, my voice brimming with cheerful efficiency. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to give you an update," I said. "I've hired a fantastic company to get the house in tip-top shape for Jason and Vanessa. They're going to do a full deep clean, fix all the little dings in the drywall, and give the whole interior a fresh coat of paint. I want it to be perfect for them and the baby." "Oh, Michael, that's so generous. You don't have to do all that," she said, though her voice betrayed her delight. "I want to," I insisted. "But here's the thing, their contract is pretty strict. For the paint to cure properly and for their insurance liability, they require the house to be completely empty and undisturbed for the full 3 weeks. No one in or out. They start Monday, so it's probably best if everyone stays away until it's all done. I'll let you know the moment it's ready for the big move-in day." It was a brilliant lie, if I do say so myself. It was wrapped in generosity, playing directly into their image of me as the responsible one. It gave me a plausible reason to deny access, and most importantly, it gave me 3 weeks of uninterrupted privacy. They swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. The close call came a week later. My father called me at work. "Michael," he said, his voice casual, too casual, "I'm going to be in your neighborhood tomorrow. Thought I'd swing by the house, maybe drop off a coffee for the painters, see how they're doing." My blood froze. Emma had scheduled 2 showings for the next day. "Oh, that's a nice thought, Dad," I stammered, my mind racing, but the foreman's real strict. He was telling me yesterday that any outside food or drink violates their workplace safety policy, something about potential contamination of surfaces. He got pretty heated about it. I really don't want to mess things up with these guys. "They're doing great work, workplace safety for painters," he scoffed. "New regulations, I guess," I said, improvising wildly. "Look, I'll be there myself on Friday to check on progress. I'll take pictures and send them to you. How's that?" He grumbled, but eventually agreed. I hung up, my hands shaking. It was a reminder of how thin the ice was. The most surreal moments came during my daily charade. I was on the phone with Vanessa, who'd appointed herself project manager of the renovation. She'd text me photos of light fixtures and faucets. One afternoon, she called while I was in the middle of a conference call with my new Chicago team. I muted them. "Michael, I'm at Home Depot," she said, breathless. "They have 2 vanities I like for the master bathroom. One's oak and the other's white. The white's a bit more expensive, but I think it fits the coastal calm aesthetic better. What do you think?" "Go with the white, Vanessa," I said, my voice flat. "Don't worry about the cost." On my computer screen, a calendar reminder popped up. "Signed preliminary sale agreement, 4 p.m. Oh, you're the best," she squealed. "Jason's so lucky to have a brother like you." I unmuted the call and said to my Chicago team, "Sorry about that, everyone. Let's move on to the quarterly projections." I was living in 2 separate realities, and the strain was starting to wear me down. Packing was a grim affair. I did it at night like a thief in my own home. I divided my life into 3 piles. The first was keep, my clothes, my books, important documents, and a few sentimental items like the math trophy and the photo of Sophia. This pile was small. The second was sell donate, the furniture, the kitchenware, the things that made the house a home. This pile was large. The third and hardest was trash. This is where the artifacts of my old life went. Old birthday cards from my parents with generic messages, a framed photo of Jason and me as kids where he held a new bike and I held the box it came in. Every memory that represented a life of being second best. Throwing them into a black trash bag felt like both betrayal and liberation. Emma Chun was a miracle worker. She brought in a wealthy investor looking for a rental property. He saw the house once, noted its good bones, and made a cash offer just shy of market value. The next day she brought the Millers, a young couple with a baby on the way who just lost out on another house in the neighborhood. They fell in love with the place instantly and made a full-price cash offer. I accepted the Millers' offer. There was a certain poetry in selling my house to a young couple who were what Jason and Vanessa pretended to be, hardworking, hopeful, building a life on their own terms. The closing was scheduled for the Thursday before the Saturday my family thought was move-in day. As I sat in the sterile office of the title attorney, signing my name over and over, a wave of profound sadness hit me. I wasn't just selling a house, I was formally renouncing my family. Each signature was a period at the end of a long, painful chapter. When it was done, the attorney handed me a slip confirming the bank transfer. It was just a number, but it was the price of my freedom. I stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight, took a deep breath, and headed to the airport. I didn't look back. I was 700 miles away in a sterile, empty Chicago apartment when the world ended for the Wilson family. I was unpacking a box labeled Kitchen Essentials when my phone, my old phone, which I'd kept for this sole purpose, began buzzing on the counter. It was 10:02 a.m., right on schedule. I ignored it. I could picture the scene with perfect, painful clarity. The big yellow U-Haul truck, a triumphant symbol of their victory, would be lumbering down my old street. My father would be at the wheel, feeling proud and powerful, a patriarch providing for his clan. Jason would be in the passenger seat, not navigating but probably scrolling through his phone, already bored with the manual labor about to ensue. My mother and Vanessa would be following in their SUV, filled with dreams of sage-green walls and safari-themed nurseries. They'd pull up to the curb of the house they already considered theirs, but something would be wrong. The lawn, which I'd let grow a little shaggy, would be perfectly manicured. There'd be vibrant new geraniums in the porch planters, replacing my sad-looking herbs, and a shiny new minivan, the quintessential family car, would be parked in the driveway. I can imagine my father striding up the path with the confidence of a man who owned the world. He'd see Mr. Miller, a friendly-looking guy in his early 30s, watering the new geraniums. "Good morning," my father would say, his voice booming, not a greeting but a dismissal. "We're here for my son to move in. Appreciate you and your crew finishing the painting ahead of schedule, but your work's done here. You can pack up now." Mr. Miller, a nice guy I'd spoken to briefly on the phone, would look up from his watering can, a polite but confused smile on his face. "Sorry, sir, painting crew. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My name's Tom Miller. My wife and I live here." My father's jovial expression would freeze. He wasn't a man who liked being contradicted. "Live here, that's a good one, son," he'd say, chuckling. "Funny. Now, seriously, the truck's double parked. This house belongs to my son, Michael Wilson." This would be the moment the first crack appeared in their perfect day. Mr. Miller's smile would fade completely, replaced by a firm resolve. "No, sir, I'm afraid you don't understand. My wife Sarah and I bought this house from Michael Wilson. We closed on Thursday." My father would laugh, a short, barking, incredulous laugh. "Bought it? That's impossible. My son wouldn't sell his house without telling me." Just then the front door would open, and Mrs. Miller, holding a baby on her hip, would step out. "Everything okay, Tom?" she asked, her eyes flicking to the U-Haul and the growing crowd of Wilsons on her lawn. "These people seem to think they're moving in," Mr. Miller would say, his voice tight with controlled frustration. To my father he'd say, "Sir, I don't want any trouble, but this is our property. I've got the deed of sale right here on the kitchen counter if you'd like to see it." By now, Jason and my mother would have walked up, sensing trouble. "What's going on?" my mother would ask, her eyes darting between my father's reddening face and the strange family on her son's porch. "This man claims he bought Michael's house," my father would spit, his voice thick with disbelief. "What?" "That's ridiculous," my mother would exclaim, fumbling for her phone in her purse. "I'll call Michael right now. He'll clear up this nonsense. He's probably just playing a prank, a stupid, cruel prank, but a prank nonetheless." Her hands would shake as she dialed my number, the number I'd disconnected the day before. She'd listen, her face paling as the automated message played. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." She'd try again, same result. Panic would start to set in, a cold tide rising in her chest. Vanessa, who'd been watching from the sidewalk, would finally march up the driveway. "What's taking so long? The movers are charging by the hour. This family claims they live here," Jason would mutter, his own confidence starting to crumble. "Don't be absurd," Vanessa would snap, turning to the Millers, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look, I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but we have an agreement with the owner. Now, if you'd kindly get off the property before we call the police." "Ma'am, we are the owners," Mrs. Miller would say, her voice now cold as ice, shifting her baby to her other hip. "And if anyone's calling the police for trespassing, it'll be us. In fact, the real estate agent who sold us this house, a lovely woman named Emma Chun, mentioned there might be some confusion. She left us her card." She'd hand the card to my mother, whose hand would shake too much to take it. My father would snatch it, staring at the name, the number, and in that moment the full, horrific truth would hit them with the force of a physical blow. The easy agreement, the promise to pack, the painter's story, the disconnected phone. It wasn't a prank. It was a plan, a cold, calculated, perfectly executed escape. I can see the look on Jason's face, the smug arrogance fading, replaced by the raw, wide-eyed panic of a spoiled child who's just been told Mom and Dad's bank is closed for good. His whole life, he'd coasted on unearned privilege, cushioned by my forced sacrifices and our parents' blind adoration. Now the safety net was gone. He'd turn on our father, his voice cracking with a lifetime of unearned confidence shattering at once. "You told me it was handled. You told me he'd do it. You said he was weak. You said you could always handle him. This is your fault." Vanessa would scream, her fury turning from the Millers to her husband. "You and your stupid get-rich-quick schemes. You promised me a house for our baby." "Shut up, Vanessa," Jason would yell back. "Don't tell me to shut up." My father would stand there, speechless, the real estate agent's card crushed in his fist, his face a mottled canvas of rage and humiliation. My mother would be sobbing openly, the perfect family imploding on the manicured lawn of a house that was supposed to be their salvation, all while the new owners watched in horrified silence. Their kingdom hadn't just been conquered, it had been dismantled brick by brick from the inside by the one person they'd always taken for granted and never saw coming. Back in my quiet Chicago apartment, the silence was my shield. The chaos unfolding 700 miles away was just a distant echo. I spent that Saturday unpacking, arranging my few belongings in my new empty space. Every book placed on a shelf, every shirt hung in the closet was an act of claiming my new life. Late that night, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't suppress, I powered on my old phone for the last time, connecting it to my apartment's Wi-Fi. It was like poking a hornet's nest with a stick. The screen erupted in a flood of notifications, a digital testament to my family's total and absolute collapse. There were 37 missed calls, 15 from Mom, 12 from Dad, 10 from Jason. The texts, when read in chronological order, painted a vivid picture of their descent into madness. It started with confusion and disbelief. Mom, 10:15 a.m. Michael, there's a misunderstanding at the house. Call immediately. Dad, 10:17 a.m. What the hell is this, Michael? Some kind of joke. It's not funny. Call now. Then it shifted to anger and threats. Dad, 10:45 a.m. Answer your phone, you coward. I swear to God I'll find you. You think you can just sell your house and run? I'll have my lawyer on you so fast it'll make your head spin. You didn't sign any papers with us, but you made a verbal contract. A lie, of course. There was never a verbal contract or otherwise. Jason, 11:02 a.m. You son of a bitch. You left us on the street. I'll find you. I swear I'll find you and you'll regret this. Vanessa, 11:30 a.m. I hope you're happy. I hope you rot, you selfish bastard. And finally, as the hours passed and the reality of my disappearance sank in, the tone soured into desperate, pathetic pleading. Mom, 3:20 p.m. Michael, please, please, honey, just tell me where you are. We can fix this. It was a mistake. We pushed too hard. I'm sorry. Whatever you want, please, honey, just call your mother. I'm so scared. Dad, 5:45 p.m. Son, just let us know you're safe, that's all. I read the messages with a strange, clinical detachment. There was a part of me that should have felt something, guilt, pity, maybe even a twinge of satisfaction, but there was nothing. It was like reading about strangers. These frantic, desperate people on the screen had no connection to the quiet, peaceful life I was starting to build. Systematically, I went through my contacts. Robert Wilson, block. Diana Wilson, block. Jason Wilson, block. Vanessa Taylor, block. With each tap of the screen, I was cutting another cord, severing another tie to the past. I was about to perform the final ritual, dropping the phone into a glass of water, when one last call came in. It was a number I hadn't blocked. Aunt Margaret, my mother's younger sister, the quiet observer in our family's drama, the only one who'd ever given me a birthday card with cash instead of a lecture. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice was a frantic whisper, laced with static, like she was hiding in a closet. Michael, oh thank God, I don't know if you'll get this, but I had to try. Your mother called me. She was incoherent, screaming and crying. Michael, I went over there. It's a mess. She took a shaky breath, and the story she told was far darker than I could have imagined. It's not just about the house, honey. It's so much worse. I finally got the whole truth out of your father. Jason didn't just lose their retirement money. That was just the start. He convinced Robert to co-sign a massive business loan from a private lender, not a bank. He told him it was for an import-export business. It was a lie. He used the money to cover gambling debts. My blood ran cold. I sat heavily on a packing box, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. It gets worse, she continued, her voice breaking. When that money ran out, he remortgaged their house, forged your dad's signature. On the second mortgage, he was getting threatening calls, Michael, from loan sharks, the kind of people you see in movies. They were going to come to the house. That's why they were so desperate for your house. Their plan was to move you out, sell it immediately, probably through some shady cash deal, and use the money to pay off the sharks before they lost everything. Or worse. It all clicked into place. The letter I'd seen was just one piece of a giant, rotten puzzle. They weren't just trying to use me as a lifeboat. They were trying to carve me up and use me as kindling to keep the wolves at bay. My supposed betrayal wasn't just an act of self-preservation. It was an escape from a situation that could have turned dangerous. My name was still on the deed. Who knows what kind of legal mess I could have been dragged into. Your dad looks like he's aged 20 years in a day, Aunt Margaret whispered. Deanna's sedated. Jason and Vanessa had a screaming fight in the front yard. She packed a suitcase and her parents came to get her. She says she's filing for divorce. Jason's just broken, sitting on the couch staring at the wall. Michael, I don't agree with what they did to you. God knows I never have. They were wrong, but I'm scared for them. I just thought you deserved to know the whole story, the real reason. The voicemail ended with a soft click. I sat in the silence of my new apartment, the skyline of a strange city glowing outside my window. There was no victory in this, no triumphant I told you so. Just the quiet, chilling confirmation that I'd done the right thing, the only thing. My family hadn't just been selfish, they'd been reckless and rotten to the core, willing to sacrifice me to protect the source of their problems. I stood and walked to the kitchen sink. I deleted Aunt Margaret's voicemail. Then I opened my new phone and sent her a short text. Thanks for everything, Aunt Margaret, for always being kind. I hope you're well. Please take care. I hit send. Then I took my old phone, the vessel of all that toxicity, and dropped it into the waiting glass of water. The screen flickered, glitched, and went dark for the last time. It was done, truly, finally done. The 18 months that followed were a quiet revolution. Chicago became my canvas, and I painted a new life with colors I chose myself. The city was beautifully indifferent. It didn't know my story, didn't care about my last name. It only cared about what I could do, what I could build. And for the first time, so did I at work, I wasn't the reliable one anymore. I was the innovator, the guy who got things done. The Chicago branch, under my leadership, didn't just meet its targets, it crushed them. I fostered a culture of collaboration and respect, the exact opposite of the toxic hierarchy I'd grown up in. I built a team, not a roster of dependents. My life outside work began to flourish too. I made friends, real friends, who liked my dry sense of humor and my surprising knowledge of 80s action movies, not what I could do for them. I started a weekly poker night with some office colleagues. I joined a softball league. I started dadding again, cautiously at first, but with a newfound ability to spot red flags from a mile away. One Saturday, my friend and colleague, Jen, invited a group of us to a backyard barbecue. It was a perfect summer day, the air smelling of grilled hot dogs and freshly cut grass. We sat on her deck sipping cheap beer, arguing over whether the '85 Bears were the greatest football team of all time, and laughing. I looked around at these new faces, at the easy camaraderie, and a profound realization hit me. This was what family could feel like, not an obligation, but a choice, a group of people you genuinely enjoyed being around who supported you without wanting to bleed you dry. I felt a sense of peace, so deep it was almost startling. But I wasn't done building. The stability I'd found made me hungry for more. I didn't just want to manage a branch, I wanted to build an empire. I saw massive untapped potential for our company in the European market. It was a long shot, a huge undertaking, but the project for it formed in my mind with crystal clarity. I spent the next 3 months working on it in secret, after hours, weekends. I pored over market research, built financial models, and developed a multi-phase expansion strategy. It was the most challenging work I'd ever done. When I finished, I didn't just email it to my boss. I flew to New York on my own dime and requested a meeting with the entire executive board. I stood in front of them in the same boardroom where I'd once been a junior analyst too nervous to speak. This time, I was in command. I laid out my vision for a London office, for a European network, for a truly global future for the company. I wasn't asking for a job. I was showing them a roadmap to greater success and telling them I was the one with the map. They were floored. The audacity, paired with the meticulous detail of my plan, was undeniable. 2 weeks later, the offer came, Director of European Operations, based in London. I hadn't just climbed the ladder, I designed and built a new one for myself. As I was in the middle of planning my move, packing up my Chicago condo, an unknown number from my old hometown's area code lit up my phone. A year ago, I would have let it go to voicemail, but now I felt nothing but a quiet curiosity. I answered. A thin, fragile voice, like old parchment, whispered my name. Michael. It took me a second to place it. It was my mother. Her voice, once so full of command and manipulative warmth, was now a weak, broken thing. I stayed silent. The silence was my answer. Michael, I know you have every right to hate us, she began, the words tumbling out in a desperate, rehearsed avalanche. But I didn't know who else to call. It's your father. He had a massive heart attack last week. The doctors said it was the stress, all the stress. I leaned against the wall of my half-empty apartment, the Chicago skyline stark and beautiful behind the glass. I felt a distant pang, not of sympathy, but of a strange, clinical sadness, a mourning for what could have been. We lost the house, Michael, she sobbed, and her tears sounded real this time. The bank foreclosed. We're living in a tiny one-bedroom rental, the kind with linoleum floors that are always sticky. Your father can't work. Jason and Vanessa got divorced. He's stocking shelves at a grocery store at night. He pays what he can in child support, but we have nothing. Your father's medical bills are piling up. They're astronomical. We're going to be bankrupt. We're going to lose everything. Her voice dropped to the desperate whisper she'd used 1,000 times before, the one that had always worked. We need your help, please. Michael, you're our only hope. Just a loan, just to cover the hospital bills. It's your father. Please don't let him die because we're poor. I listened to it all. I heard the desperation, the fear, the lifetime of bad decisions crashing down on them. But this time, the emotional hooks found no purchase. I was no longer the family anchor. I was my own ship with my own course. I took a deep breath. Mom, I said, my voice profoundly calm. I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health. I really am. I paused, letting the words settle. But my whole life, I was the emergency fund. I was the backup plan. My future, my savings, my relationships, my own home. They were all treated as resources to be tapped to fix problems I didn't create. I'm not that person anymore. I have a new life now, one I built myself. What are we supposed to do? She wailed. He's Jason's father. And you're Jason's mother, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. You made your choice decades ago about who your priority was. You have to live with that choice. You all do. I have my own life to manage now. I wish you and Dad the best in finding a solution. I let another moment of silence pass, a final tribute to the relationship that was now officially over. The backup plan is no longer available, I said softly. Goodbye, Mom. I ended the call before she could respond. This time, I didn't feel the need to block her number. I knew with absolute certainty she'd never call again. The bank was closed. A week later, just before I left for London, a thick envelope arrived from my grandfather's estate lawyer. He passed away peacefully a month earlier. My grief was real and sharp. He'd been my quiet ally. Inside was a personal letter, written in his shaky, familiar handwriting. Michael, it began, if you're reading this, my time's up. I'm writing to tell you I changed my will after that last phone call we had. I knew you were doing something hard, something brave. Your father was furious, of course, but my mind was made up. This isn't about punishing him. It's about rewarding the one person in the family who understands the value of building, not taking. I've left the bulk of my estate directly to you. Your father and brother are taken care of, but your future is now and always should have been yours. Use this to build, son. Never look back. Your grandmother and I are so proud of the man you've become, your own man. The tears that fell on that letter weren't tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated gratitude. The validation I'd spent my whole life seeking had finally come, not from the parents who should have given it, but from the one man wise enough to see the truth. London wasn't just a new city, it was a new state of being. The gray skis and historic streets were a world away from the sun-drenched suburban drama of my past. My life was finally mine, every minute of it. My apartment, overlooking a quiet garden square in Kensington, was my sanctuary, built on a foundation of peace, not obligation. My grandfather's inheritance was a responsibility I took seriously. It wasn't lottery winnings to be squandered. It was seed money for a new legacy. My first major act was to establish a foundation. I called it the Reynolds Wilson Scholarship, named for Mrs. Reynolds, the teacher who first saw a spark of potential in a lonely kid, and Thomas Wilson, the grandfather who fanned that spark into a flame. The scholarship provides full, 4-year college funding for high-achieving students from difficult family backgrounds, kids who, like me, had to learn to build their own ladders. Turning the pain of my past into the foundation for their futures felt like the only right thing to do. I received one last email from Aunt Margaret. It was a brief, grim update. My parents had been forced to declare bankruptcy. They were living in a small, government-subsidized senior apartment. My father's health was stable but poor. Jason was still working at the grocery store, struggling to make child support payments for the daughter he rarely saw. The news brought me no joy, no sorrow. It was like reading a postscript to a book I'd finished and shelved long ago. Their story had gone on, but it was no longer tied to mine. I wished them peace from a distance and moved on. One autumn evening, as I dressed for the Scholarship Foundation's first annual awards dinner, one final ghost from my past arrived. A single letter, sent across an ocean in several forwarding addresses, landed at my London doorstep. The handwriting was my father's. My hands were perfectly steady as I opened it. The note was short, a few bitter lines scrawled on cheap paper. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of his own role in his downfall, just raw, unadorned blame from a broken man. You had everything, it read. You could have saved this family, but you chose to be selfish and throw it all away. I hope you're happy with what you've done. You destroyed us. I read the words. Years ago, they would have gutted me, a dagger of guilt twisted in my heart. But now they were just words, the sad, final ramblings of a man who never understood that you can't destroy something that was already broken. I walked to the small, sleek paper shredder in my home office. I didn't tear the letter up or burn it. I calmly fed it into the slot. The machine whirred to life, its quiet, mechanical hum filling the room. The sound of the blade slicing his last, bitter words into meaningless strips of confetti was the sound of my final, absolute release. Just as the last shred of paper vanished, my phone rang. It was a FaceTime call from Jen in Chicago. Her smiling face filled the screen. "Hey boss, look at you in a tux," she said brightly. "Ready for your big night. You're about to make some dreams come true." "That's the plan," I said, returning her smile, a genuine warmth spreading through my chest. "Well, listen to this," she said, laughing. "You won't believe who called the Chicago office today asking to be put through to you. Your brother, Jason, said it was an urgent, personal family matter. Don't worry, I gave him the standard, we have a strict policy speech. He didn't sound good, Michael." He sounded small. I turned and looked out the window. The lights of London were starting to glow against the deep purple of the evening sky. It was a beautiful, sprawling, infinite city, my city. I thought of Jason, a ghost with a desperate voice trying to reach me across an ocean and a lifetime of bad blood, and I felt nothing but a vast, peaceful distance. I turned back to the screen, back to my friend, back to my new life. I smiled, a real smile, free of shadows and obligations. "It's too late," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I'm not anyone's backup plan anymore." Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace? Share your story in the comments below. And if this meant something to you, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.